previous prisons, and most arrived with too many boxes of personal belongings, which the Corcoran guards grinningly tape measured and pronounced excessive. They could either ship it home at their own expense or donate it to oblivion. They had to decide right then and there at the bus stop. Welcome to the SHU, pal. There were other new rules encountered that first day. SHU prisoners couldn't wear their own clothes or even prison blues, but instead were issued cheap, yellow rayon jumpsuits. Headquarters were thinking about phasing in these jumpsuits system-wide since no gang had ever claimed yellow as their color. Similarly, the Converse All-Stars that bangers love for their symbolic colors were replaced in the SHU with ugly, piss-colored sneakers that looked like duck's feet. Another new rule involved the personal television sets that many veteran convicts had lugged from cell to cell for years. The SHU required them to have clear plastic housings so nothing could be hidden inside among the wires and circuit boards. This meant just about every one of those beloved TVs were left behind in the parking lot, next to their favorite clothes, shoes, and excess baggage. But the rudest shock of all was the no tobacco rule, the first of its kind at any prison in America. Now, more than ever, snatching a man's cigarettes was a guaranteed fistfight. All in all, the new arrivals' first reaction to the place was to get mightily self-righteously pissed off, and the guards got used to it quickly. The gas guns were kept close at hand. It took about 6 weeks to fill 3 SHU buildings with top-ranked gangsters and short-fused brawlers, all mixed together and keeping in accordance with official state policy. None of them liked their new home. There were 2 small, high-walled exercise yards for SHU inmates, like concrete handball courts, where one pod tier at a time, 15 or 20 angry men wearing boxers, t-shirts, and flip-flops were released for 90 minutes of daily mingling. They fought for the first day, either one-on-one or all together, and they weren't wimpy slappers but brutal stompers who didn't back off when a man was down. The only way to stop the fighting was with wooden bullets fired by the gunner overlooking the scene. There were no yard officers in the small SHU yards. Even in Sacramento, they knew that job was too dangerous for anyone. Instead, there was a gunner in a second-floor window who could see everything and issue firm orders, just like headquarters policymakers. Besides his wooden bullet gas gun, the gun post officer was armed with the Heckler & Koch 9mm assault rifle that fired Glazer blue-tip 9mm rounds, the same weapon issued to most California Police Department SWAT teams. He was under instructions to use lethal force whenever he thought someone's life was threatened, whether guard or inmate. This would logically be a position for a veteran officer with proven judgment, but that wasn't the case. There weren't enough veteran officers to go around in the rapidly expanding, undermanned, and overcrowding prison system. My job was more prosaic, but kept me busy. Feeding dinner in the SHU meant routing up my crew. By mid-afternoon, loading the pre-cooked meals at the main kitchen, driving them through security with the cart-towing tractor to the SHU kitchen, then warming the food and serving it up on styrofoam trays that couldn't be made in the sharp blades. The floor officers in each pod made the actual deliveries to the inmates in their cells through small ports in the perforated steel doors. My crew handled cleanup and returned the warming trays to the main kitchen before I escorted inmates back to C Yard. They were strip searched and shackled again. I had acquired a partner by this time, a spit-shine newcomer from Selma, California named Jesse Gonzalez, who graduated from the California Department of Corrections Academy 2 classes behind me. At first, he was a junior partner and treated accordingly, with that same curt scrutiny that I had faced. But it only took a few weeks for Officer Gonzalez to become Jesse. We both had a serious demeanor that revealed itself in attention to detail, from shiny pots to correct uniforms. It soon evolved into a got-your-back trust that cops always hope to find in their partners. The SHU kitchen was a smooth-running operation by early March, when the last SHU prisoners were due to arrive. At Corcoran, one pod had been reserved for protective custody, the home for prisoners so treacherous and notorious they needed to be kept out of sight and sequestered from human consciousness. Men like Sirhan Sirhan, Robert Kennedy's assassin, and Juan Corona, the machete murderer, who hacked up 25 migrant workers in 6 weeks averaging an all-time record of 1 murder every 40 hours. Corcoran had a whole tier of serial killers, freeway killers, William Brown and Patrick Kearney, who killed 20 boys each, Hillside Strangler Angelo Buono, who murdered 10 women, and the Night Stalker Ricardo Ramirez, a serial killer responsible for taking 14 innocent lives. In fact, Corcoran imprisoned the first man ever tagged with serial killer. Called the co-ed killer when still at large in Santa Cruz, Kemper was the model for the Buffalo Bill character in the Thomas Harris novel, The Silence of the Lambs. After interviewing him in jail in 1972, FBI agent Robert Ressler, founder of the agency heralded Violent Criminal Apprehension Program, VICAP, coined the term serial killer to describe Kemper's monstrous habit. The atrocities these new inmates committed were beyond brutal, even for violent criminals, so they had to be segregated for their own protection. Their infamy made them targets for prisoners with nothing to lose, redemption to be won by striking at the first opportunity. They survived only by extraordinary exile to the most remote corners of state prisons, which is how they ended up in the Corcoran shoe. By the time they arrived here, Kemper and his fellow psychopaths were all pudgy and sallow from sedentary years spent recalling the horrors they inflicted. They even had the audacity to constantly whine for extra dinners. The most infamous prisoner of them all arrived that month to take up residence. I was early to work that day and went for a stroll on the roof of Building 4, which looked out across the broad cotton fields to the north and west. From a long ways off, I could see a small convoy of green CDC vehicles, 2 SUVs escorting a van in the middle. The lead SUV was clearly in radio contact with the main security office because guards were waiting at every gate to wave them through without stopping, which I had never seen before. The convoy pulled up right below me, where the protective housing unit was located. 6 correctional officers jumped from the SUVs brandishing rifles and shotguns to secure the area, like a Secret Service detail protecting the president. One of the officers looked up and saw me. I held up my hands to show I was harmless, but the officer still aimed his shotgun at me and ordered me away from the entrance. The team leader signaled to the van, and the side door slid open. 2 burly officers emerged, looked around, then reached inside and lifted out a small, skinny man wrapped in chains. It was Charles Manson. Like several other mass murderers who came to the shoe of Corcoran, Manson had escaped the gas chamber when the California Supreme Court overturned the death penalty in the early 1970s. In another stroke of luck, his notoriety preceded the 1982 state law, passed largely because of him, that prohibited criminals from profiting on their guilt. In San Quentin, he'd become rich, selling autographs, drawings, bad poems, and songs to his fans. This made other prisoners envious, especially those who thought themselves more hardcore than some sick hippie baby killer. Charles Manson was the #1 target in the whole prison system, and everybody knew it, including him. The first thing he did when he got to Corcoran was buy new shoe-approved TV sets for all the inmates in his pod. 3 weeks later, the first shoe inmate was shot to death. His name was William Martinez, and he was a 30-year-old Nuestra Familia gangster convicted of armed robbery in Oakland. He and Pedro Lamelli, an MA member from Los Angeles, had been restricted to their cells for 10 days for fighting. As soon as their restriction was over on April 7th, they were right back at it. The security video shows Martinez charging across the yard at Lamelli the second he comes out the door. The gun post officer was a smart, vaguely nerdy 25-year-old named Robert Rob Christian, who had been in my class at the academy. He'd been on the job for less than a year and was standing guard over the most hardened, angry gangsters in any prison in the country, with orders to use lethal force if anyone's life was threatened. The video shows 2 bangers wailing on each other for 13 seconds before Lomelli goes down and Martinez, still in his flip-flops, starts kicking him violently. Wooden bullets were fired, but missed both fighters. At that point, Martinez steps back, but Christian was already busy with the H&K chambering one of the Glacier safety rounds that were standard issue to police and prison guards because the blue Teflon tips shattered easily on impact, minimizing the risk of ricochets when used in close quarters. They made a nasty big hole when they hit something soft, however, like the middle of Martinez's back. At the shooting review board, Christian testified that Martinez was kicking Lamelli in the head when he fired, and it probably did seem that way to him. A stopwatch on the video shows a 4-second pause between the last kick and the gunshot. That's just a blink when a scared young man's adrenaline is racing. The board backed him up and called the shooting justified, establishing a precedent that other courtroom review boards would follow time and time again, the bloody months and years to come. Every prison in the state was shorthanded, and experienced guards were needed in all of them. The state was paying moving expenses and per diem for 60 days until candidates found residency. At this point, I would have more seniority at a brand new prison. So when I saw the flyer from Sacramento seeking lateral transfers for Calipatria State Prison, a maximum state prison located in the lower desert of California, I submitted my transfer package request immediately and escaped the shoe kitchen.